The Nigel Farage Show.
Good morning, everybody. Well, Tony Blair's back out there again. He can't keep away, can he, really? And a big interview today that he's done with Sophie Ridge on Sky News. And one or two very interesting things that he said, and clearly a pretty big shift in his position. So we'll talk about Blair. Has he effectively this morning just killed off the People's Vote campaign for a second referendum that includes Remain on the ballot paper? So we're going to talk about that. I will also talk a bit about the Brexit Party, which became a legal political party in this country on Friday. Lots of you have got questions about that. But let's listen to Tony Blair talking this morning about no deal.
Brexit, no one could responsibly propose this. It would be economically very, very dangerous for Britain, and for the peace process in Ireland, it would potentially be devastating. You would have a hard border, very hard border. A no-deal Brexit means a really hard border between North and South in Ireland. It's contrary to the Good Friday Agreement, and it will cause an enormous fissure within the United Kingdom.
Do you think that some politicians are playing fast and loose then with the peace process?
Well, I think they've been playing fast and loose with it from the very beginning. Those people who cheerfully say that you can put the United Kingdom and the Republic of Ireland in a completely different relationship with Europe in trading terms, and it make no difference to the economy of the North of Ireland. I don't know on what basis they possibly say that.
So that was Blair basically saying he does not want a WTO deal. He uses the word devastating for the peace process. He said it would be the hardest of all hard borders. But it's the next part that I think is even more interesting. Bear in mind that Tony Blair has been the chief cheerleader for a second referendum, for indeed a rerun, effectively, of the referendum that we had before, and that then morphed into the People's Vote campaign with his old friend Alistair Campbell, of course, very much involved, Lord Adonis and many of the others. But here today was Tony Blair on a second referendum, and it's a very, very different tune.
I've never thought that you would get to another referendum going directly to it. You'll get to it when people see what the true Brexit alternatives are. And the truth is, there are two. You can have a soft Brexit, which is really what Jeremy Corbyn's suggesting, or you can have the hard Brexit that Boris Johnson and Nigel Farage and other people want. And what I've really been saying all the way through this process is you've got to decide which of those Brexits you want before you leave. Otherwise, you're going to leave without clarity. And if you leave without clarity, no closure. The argument just goes on, and by then you'll have left, you'll have paid your money up front, you'll have given up your negotiating leverage, and for the country to do that, as Theresa May wants to do, to leave without knowing what Brexit you get, this would be, in my view, an incredibly foolish thing for the country to do. It's got to know where we're heading before we leave.
Let's just listen again to that key thing that Blair said this morning.
And the truth is, there are two. You can have a soft Brexit, which is really what Jeremy Corbyn's suggesting, or you can have the hard Brexit that Boris Johnson and Nigel Farage and other people want.
There you go. That's Blair. He didn't even use the word Remain in the context of a second referendum, but he now thinks we should have a choice on do we go for what he calls a hard Brexit, or do we go for basically the Jeremy Corbyn deal? Interesting, isn't it? This is almost the first time that Blair and Corbyn appear actually to be aligned on something. But it is a big shift. He's not saying we can reverse this. He's almost, if you listen to him, accepting the inevitability that we are going to leave the European Union. Now, of course, I'm sure that if we get a few weeks down the road and there's a possibility of delaying or extending Article 50, I'm sure Blair would come in and support that. But for now, there appears to be a big shift. I wonder why this is. Is it in response to the fact that there is no great public appetite for the so-called People's Vote? Let me ask you, has Tony Blair this morning just killed off the People's Vote? And if you think, nope, Remaining should still be on the table. People want it. Call 0345 6060 973. Maybe you agree with me that in many ways Remain is not going to be part of any second referendum because they know they'd lose. Text to 84850 and tell me, which would you choose? Soft Brexit or hard Brexit? By which I mean real Brexit, which I think is what we voted for, or staying part of a customs union and single market rules. And you can tweet using the hashtag Farage and LBC at LBC, and of course Facebookers, you can comment there too. Let's go to Steve in Great Dunmow. Steve, good morning to you.
Good morning to you, Nigel. No, I think Tony Blair would have the opposite effect with his view. I think he'd actually make more people angry. No one's going to listen to him. The reason why I want a hard Brexit, and I've always wanted a hard Brexit, is simply because if we don't have a hard Brexit, we'll get a socialist government or something in the near future, and we'll wake up one morning and we'll be back in the common market. And that's why it's very important to have a very big break, a constant break, and make our deals outside.
I'm not sure I agree with that, Steve. I'm not sure I agree with that at all. I'll tell you why.
Really?
Because once you've left something, can you imagine? So if the referendum was to rejoin the European Union, there's not a cat's chance in hell of us voting for it. So I think once we've left. Now,
no. If we don't leave if we don't leave properly, Nigel, we have a Mickey Mouse deal. We'll wake up one morning in 10, 15 years' time, and we'll be back in the common market. That's what will happen. I mean, I don't trust anything these people say. Most government officials, the cover-ups in the past, you've only got to look at how the Cook report was closed down regarding David Cameron and Kenneth Clarke's stuff. And, I don't trust anybody. I don't trust any of them. I want a total Brexit. I want my country back. I want to run a country with 65 million people. And be an independent country. I want to be friends with Europe. I don't want to be run by Europe.
So clean Brexit, Steve. Clean Brexit.
Proper, clean Brexit. And that way we'll never be able to wake up in the morning and rejoin it, which is what they will do.
All right.
That's what will happen.
OK, Steve, my only point of disagreement is I think once we've left, even if it's a rotten deal, the chances of us rejoining as full members, I think, are unlikely. But hey, Steve, thank you. Now, Lloyd in Worcester knows his mind. I choose a diamond Brexit. The hardest material known to man. Remainers know there is no interest in a second referendum. Blair knows that no deal is becoming more popular. Well, Tony, of course, a no deal is becoming more popular amongst the public, but don't kid yourself. It's not becoming more popular in Westminster, all of which amazes me that the Article 24 of the GATT Treaty isn't talked about a lot more. More on that. Let's go to Andrew in Warwick. Hi, Andrew. Good morning.
Hello again, Nigel. How are you?
So, big shift from Blair.
Yeah, I believe so. I think that the reason why Blair wants a soft Brexit is because, especially, having heard what Shami Chakravarti was talking about with Andrew Neil, it's clear that means keeping free movement. It means staying under the ECJ. And it means remaining in all but name anyway.
Yes.
And then on top of that, we've got all the stuff that's going on with defence, which will bind us in more tightly. It gives them some time to reorganise the forces of darkness that are going to push us back in. And I agree with you that we won't join as full members. It's going to be worse than that. We're going to join as vassal state and stay there.
There is, Andrew, I would agree, there is a very big risk of that Theresa May delivers something that is Brexit in name only, and in fact we've got no more freedom over our economic affairs than we had before. There is a real risk of that. But isn't the even bigger risk, Andrew, that you can see that it seems to me the people's vote, the second referendum idea on with the Remain options gone, isn't their focus now going to be to try and do everything they can to get Article 50 extended?
Well, I think so. I think everything's about creating more space for them to do what they've been doing already to try and frustrate any sort of proper Brexit. But the thing that really worries me is that this is going to bind the hands of future Parliament. Even with 615 Brexit Party MPs in Parliament, can we really get out of something? We can't repeal treaties. How do we get out?
Well, of course you can repeal treaties, and there is a Vienna Convention on how you do that. But yeah, the danger is, Andrew, that to change things again, we have another huge shift and something that could take us many, many years. And I completely understand that argument, completely understand that risk. Would you rather, Andrew? Would you rather have the risk then of a second referendum than Parliament agreeing on Mrs May's withdrawal agreement?
Well, to a certain extent, I think if we actually withdrew Article 50 completely and remained, and then ended up with a Brexit Party in Parliament and a strong, I mean, there's going to be a very strong populist, hopefully a very strong populist wave in May anyway. I think that would be, if you can't pull out of it because it's going to fall over, to some extent, we should go back in and push it down from the inside. But that would be much more dangerous to us. But I mean, you can only repeal a treaty provided there is a recognition in the treaty that you've signed of non-mutual repeal.
And that's the problem with the backstop, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Well, there's that problem and all the practical problems that they're going to create as well. Just in the same way as if Italy's going to get out, they've got the euro now. So they have to create the monetary system. Yeah. No, Andrew, the current withdrawal agreement doesn't give us a way out in theory. In practice, with political will, you can do what the hell you like. Thank you. Right, now, Simon in Reading is trying to take issue with me. If you actually listen to what he says you have two options for Brexit. Remaining isn't Brexit. This does not rule out Remain. You are twisting words for your own benefit. Simon, he could easily have said that the second referendum should be between Remain and, a form of Brexit, but he doesn't even mention Remain. He says in the context of a second referendum, it should be on what Brexit we're going to have. I put it to you, Simon, my interpretation of his words is 100% right. If you disagree with me, call 0345 6060 973. You're listening to a Sunday edition of the Nigel Farage Show here on LBC, and it's 10:15.
This is LBC.
Smile. The TUI sale is now on, with great offers on destinations from Turkey to Tenerife. Reunite and save up to £200 per couple. Book online or visit your local TUI store and fly direct from London Stansted Airport. We cross the T's, dot the I's and put you in the middle. TUI. Discover your smile. Atoll protected. Offer available on selected holidays. Departures from May 2019 for a limited time and subject to availability. Booking T's and C's apply. See website for details.
So, your accountant does your audit for you, looks at your accounts, calculates your tax, stuff like that. But would you benefit from long-term advice, an expert to look at your business model and help your business grow? And most importantly, someone to look after you, the owner. At Barnes Rofe, our partners get to know their clients and want to become part of their team. Is it time to see what we can do for you? Arrange your free consultation at barnesrofe.com. Barnes Rofe. Clever accountants for business.
He's the lifelong Marxist who wants to be Prime Minister. But there's so much we don't know about Jeremy Corbyn. Exclusively inside the Mail on Sunday, an explosive new book by a top investigative author reveals what Corbyn's ex-wives really think of him, what his politics could mean for your family, and the real Corbyn behind the public face. Jeremy Corbyn, Dangerous Hero. Revelations no voter can afford to miss. Exclusively inside the Mail on Sunday.
Sorry, Mrs. Mills. Your boiler needs replacing.
Oh no, what would you recommend?
Well, I see you've got a Bosch washing machine.
Yes, it's never let me down.
Exactly. I'd recommend a Worcester Bosch Green Star 29 CDI. It's really reliable and it's been awarded a Best Buy from Which. And with a Bosch Easy Control, you can even adjust the heating from your phone. So simple, your cat could do it. To find your new boiler, a local installer, and receive up to a 10-year guarantee, search Warm as Worcester.
Previously on Family Street.
I can't just forget what happened.
It was a stupid mistake.
I don't want to hear it.
But it needs to be said.
Oh, don't say it, Betty. I won't let you say it.
Purple Brick sold more houses more quickly than any other top 10 estate agent.
Yeah!
Save yourself from commisery at purplebricks.co.uk.
Independent sales data from 20CI for 12 months to April 2018, based on average time between instruction and agreement of sale. See purplebricks.co.uk for more details.
If you're a frequent traveller in premium, business and first class, is your travel agent charging you too much? Switching to Bright Sun Travel's 24/7 tailor-made travel services means you could pay less on flights and hotels and enjoy free benefits like early and late checkout, room upgrades and hotel credits. Conditions apply. Visit brightsun.co.uk. Atoll protected.
The Nigel Farage Show on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
Some very strong words from Tony Blair about what a hard Brexit, a WTO no-deal Brexit would mean for Northern Ireland. He says there'd be devastating consequences, the hardest of hard borders. And yet, he's kind of not saying that if we had a soft Brexit, a Jeremy Corbyn-style Brexit, there'd be any problem at all. And I just can't get my head around this. I mean, even just this week, Fujitsu saying to the government, we've got a system, we can put some tiny cameras on the border, see who's coming in, see who's going out. There'll be no need for checks of any kind at all. Even Mr. Barnier has said that. I mean, I drove in this morning to London. I can't think how many speed cameras I drove past, and then, of course, you come into the congestion zone, not working on Sundays, but there are lots of ways of tracking who's going in and who's going out without building sentry posts and having soldiers with guns. I find the whole argument absolutely extraordinary, but more significantly, this is what he said about a second referendum.
And the truth is, there are two. You can have a soft Brexit, which is really what Jeremy Corbyn's suggesting, or you can have the hard Brexit that Boris Johnson and Nigel Farage and other people want.
There are two choices, Blair says. It's soft Brexit or hard Brexit. Remain, he hasn't even talked about in the entirety of the interview. Huge response we're getting on Facebook this morning from you, one of the biggest we've ever had, actually. Alison says, no more referendums, we've already voted. Caroline says there is no option for the country to succeed with a hard Brexit. Well, Caroline, I don't agree with that. Frankly, and let me say it again, that if we leave on a WTO deal, and we apply to the World Trade Organization under Article 24 of the GATT Treaty, and the European Union do the same, which they would need to because, gosh, they've got European elections coming up. They don't want their cars and their wine facing tariffs in this country. We would then have a minimum period of 2 years after we'd left. We would have left the single market, would have left the customs union, would have left the EU, got a 2-year period in which we can negotiate and come to a grown-up trade agreement. And do you know something? A tariff-free deal between us and the EU, actually, once the politics is out of the way, becomes a pretty straightforward thing to do. Pauline says, people voted nearly 3 years ago and we're still waiting. Pauline, we are still waiting, and if the withdrawal agreement goes through, it's going to be at least 2020, but more likely the end of 2021, before we're any further forwards. I think the whole thing is outrageous. I think it shows a complete lack of leadership. Pat is a new caller from Isleworth. Good morning, Pat.
Good morning, Nigel. How are you?
Welcome. Well, I'm actually rather pleased because I think there is a shift, Pat, in this whole debate. I kind of noticed a couple of weeks ago that when YouGov asked people what were their preferred options, and they had the choice, of the WTO, Brexit, May's deal, etc., Remain, that second referendum was only the first choice preference for 8% of people. So I'm pleased that Remain is beginning to come off the table, for now anyway.
Yeah, I've got to say, I agree with you on that, but it's no doubt, if you looked at the polls and looked at the way the question was asked about Remain or a second referendum, they asked people in a certain way whether they wanted a voice and a vote, i.e. whether they wanted more referendums and a voice on democracy. And people were very keen on that. However, when they actually asked people, do you want a second referendum on Leave or Remain, they were up in arms.
I know, the same people, yeah.
Yeah, well, we've had a people's vote. We voted. We're all expecting now the government to carry out those wishes, as was said in, the £9 million leaflet, and also every politician from here to Kingdom Come told us that, leaving meant coming out of this, coming out of that. But now we appear to be in a situation, and Tony Blair, he did actually precede that sentence with "the truth is," which sadly for Tony Blair and the Labour Party, the Iraq war is still causing a lot of consequences in trust for politicians. 1 million people marched in the street, and when we were told recently that 750,000 people marched in the street,
which they didn't,
it turned out the numbers were actually 200 or 250,000. So, and the mainstream media aren't telling us things about the Gilets Jaunes protest that's now in its 12th week.
Pat, I did a piece on Thursday from Paris, and what we said was that Tuesday 80,000 people had marched through the streets of Paris with lots of violence, lots of, windows of banks smashed in, and it almost got no coverage here at all. I think, and I was pleased that we did that on Thursday.
All over France, there's peaceful protests of middle-class people who've worked all their lives, and the main cause of problem is the high taxation that they're getting taxed for, and the fact that the new government wants to tax them even more,
on fuel,
more austerity. And we also get told in this country that the austerity measures that are in place are down to the Tory government. But the actual fact is, Italy was just told it cannot do what it wants to do, which is a bit of freedom in its financial, planning and way ahead, because the EU wants it to be in austerity because of the financial.
Well, once you sign up to the euro, you have to do what you're told, basically. Pat, thank you for your call. I'm going to move on. On Twitter, Peter says, I think what he's actually saying is there is a choice of a true Brexit or Brexit in name only. Well, I have to say, I do think the Corbyn plan, which basically Blair endorsed today, it really is Brexit in name only. We'd still be stuck with EU laws and rules, and it's not what I voted for, I have to say. Nick is calling from Kings Lynn. He's called before. Good morning, Nick.
Hello, Mr. Farage, seeing that you're calling him Blair all the time. How you doing, Nigel?
I'm doing all right. I do call him Tony to his face, I promise you, Nick.
Oh, that's no good, is it? It is a media. Let's have a bit of respect all round, shall we? I think you're just manipulating what he said, actually.
I'm not really, am I?
I don't think. Well, I don't think he's ruling out a second referendum or a proper referendum, not a second. I think he's just merely laying on the table.
Nick, I tell you what. Just let's listen again to what he said. Just hang on a sec.
And the truth is, there are two. You can have a soft Brexit, which is really what Jeremy Corbyn's suggesting, or you can have the hard Brexit that Boris Johnson and Nigel Farage and other people want.
Nick, he was asked what's going to happen with a future referendum, and he's now saying we should have a second referendum, and the choice should be, Corbyn's effectively stay part of the customs union and single market, or a WTO Brexit. I mean, that is a shift, Nick, isn't it?
No, I don't think it is. All he's just saying is what's on the table at the moment amongst the mainstream executive and legislature. That is not definitely ruling out a second referendum. But I think there is only one proper referendum question now that can exist, and that is a no deal and a choice of staying in the European Union. And now that the facts are known about what no deal means and are becoming more enlightened to a lot of people, I think that would be a far more democratic choice than what
well, then why, Nick?
Back in 2016.
Well, then why, Nick? Given that Tony Blair has been arguing consistently ever since June 2016 that we needed to rethink this, that leaving the European Union was a huge mistake, why would he not use the opportunity today on Sky News to continue that campaign relentlessly? He's been talking about Remain being on the ballot paper. Today he doesn't do so. Nick, it's a shift.
I don't think it is, Nigel. Well, I didn't hear the interview on Sky. I've got to hear the whole thing. But I'm sure he hasn't just fundamentally done a U-turn on not having another referendum. And if he has, then he's useful to you, is he?
No,
he's become a useful asset.
He wants a second referendum. I don't want a second referendum, all right? So I disagree with him on that. But what he's saying is, the question is, it's either this form of Brexit where you leave the Treaty of Rome and its subsequent amending treaties and you stay part of the customs union and single market rules, or you just leave on WTO rules. That's what he's saying, Nick. And I believe it to be a big shift. And I mean, Nick, you tell me, do you actually think, and you've said that your choice of referendum would be WTO, save 39 billion, or Remain, fine. But do you really think there's an appetite, Nick, out there for it?
Yes, I think there is. It's only because since we had that very belated vote in the House of Commons over where Theresa May lost about 27 votes in 2 days, the media seems to have downplayed this idea that another referendum is on the cards. This has all been media orchestrated. I think, really, there is a very strong urge for a proper referendum, not a second referendum. It was never a second. As per what your friend Donald Tusk said, it was never a proper referendum because there was no...
Well, I agree. Nick, I agree with you. We had the whole global establishment saying vote Remain, and we still voted leave. Nick, you and I disagree. We will talk again. I know we will. John from Cornwall says, another scare from Blair. He and Campbell, what a pair. Let's get out, hard and fair. Lots of dosh left to spare. Very good, John. And, we would not be paying them 39 billion. And that's the problem with all this, isn't it? Mrs May has tried somehow to steer this course between the two, and I think in the end satisfied no one. Paul is a new caller from Plock in Poland. Good morning.
Good morning. It's pronounced Płock.
Is it right? Okay, well, I'll stand corrected on that, Paul. Good morning. So Blair warning us about Northern Ireland, but he's changed his tune on Remain being on the ballot paper, it seems to me.
Well, he's a very canny politician. I think I wouldn't begin to try and speculate about where he stands on anything, really. I think in regards to Brexit, with the Northern Ireland, I think a problem with Brexit is it does come into a kind of direct confrontation with the Good Friday Agreement, and I think this is the root of the problem.
Well, Paul, I mean, the former First Minister of Northern Ireland, Lord Trimble, actually takes the opposite view, and he thinks that in many ways the Good Friday Agreement is being abused by politicians at the moment because the principle of consent's not being called into view. I mean, why do we need a hard border, Paul?
Well, why do we need a hard border? That's a leading question. I'm not really sure how to answer it. Because,
and who's going to build it, Paul? I mean, we're not going to build it. Varadkar, the Taoiseach, says he's not going to build it. I've asked Barnier time and again, he says he's not going to build it. I mean, and surely, Paul, if we finish up with a free trade deal with the EU, which I believe we will, I think this is soluble.
Well, I think it's soluble, but I think we have to deal with the realities. I mean, the reason I actually called you, which I told your assistant, was that I wondered what your feelings were about Brexit's involvement in what could possibly be the beginning of the breakup of the UK because of this ambiguous state.
I think in terms of Scotland, I think Scotland is now part of the United Kingdom. I think the separation argument's pretty much gone for now. As far as Northern Ireland's concerned, well, if there was a referendum in Northern Ireland, you'd be asking the people of Northern Ireland to join the Euro, and I'm not sure they'd do it, but Paul, none of us know. Thank you. You're listening to a Sunday edition of the Nigel Farage Show here on LBC. It's 10:30 and time for the news with Rachel Garish.
Tony Blair says a no-deal Brexit would lead to potentially devastating consequences for the peace process in Northern Ireland. The former Labour Prime Minister also said his party hasn't been robust enough on stamping out anti-Semitism. It's been another violent night in London. A man's been stabbed to death in East Dulwich in the southeast, while 4 teenagers have now been arrested after a 16-year-old boy was stabbed in Hayes in the west yesterday. LBC's heard calls for driving laws to change, as prosecutors confirm they are looking at whether to charge Prince Philip over his crash in Norfolk last month. Yesterday, Buckingham Palace confirmed the Duke has decided to give up his driving licence. LBC weather: heavy rain for the south with snow in parts of Wales. Sunshine later on for Scotland and northern areas with a high of 7 degrees.
LBC.
He's the lifelong Marxist who wants to be Prime Minister. But there's so much we don't know about Jeremy Corbyn. Exclusively inside the Mail on Sunday, an explosive new book by a top investigative author reveals what Corbyn's ex-wives really think of him, what his politics could mean for your family, and the real Corbyn behind the public face. Jeremy Corbyn, Dangerous Hero. Revelations no voter can afford to miss. Exclusively inside the Mail on Sunday.
For hundreds of years, Indian food has been about sharing great food with the people you love. For over 5 years, Manjal Restaurant have brought North and South India together in the heart of London. And due to its success, now we've come to Chigwell Loughton. Experience the essence of India and make memories with Manjal. Book now at manjalrestaurant.com.
Vitality Health Insurance.
Oh, hi. Is it true if I join Vitality I get de facto 5-star rated cover, can speak to a GP 24/7, get rewarded for staying active with things like Starbucks coffee, get a little sausage dog to live with me, and you could beat my current premium by up to 10%?
Absolutely. Except one of those.
It's the dog, isn't it?
Yeah.
Time to review your health insurance. Just search Vitality Health. Vitality. Positively different. Minimum monthly premiums, terms and conditions apply.
There are 2 types of people in this world. Those that wait and those that do. This is for the doers. You know that luck isn't found, it's made. And here at Esme, we know that good things come to those who go and get them. That's why our business loans are simple and easy to arrange, so you can seize every day. Apply today. Search Esme Loans. Eligibility criteria and fees apply.
It's time. Time to join the millions of people that meet happy with Zoom video conferencing. With stunning HD video, crisp audio, and instant wireless sharing across any mobile, tablet, or desktop device. But the best thing about Zoom? It just works. So ditch the distractions, join the movement, and meet happy with Zoom video conferencing. Visit zoom.us to set up your free account today. That's zoom.us. Zoom video conferencing.
Smile. The TUI sale is now on, with great offers on destinations from Turkey to Tenerife. Reunite and save up to £200 per couple. Book online or visit your local TUI store and fly direct from London Stansted Airport. We cross the T's, dot the I's and put you in the middle. TUI. Discover your smile. Atoll protected. Offer available on selected holidays. Departures from May 2019 for a limited time and subject to availability. Booking T's and C's apply. See website for details.
Leading Britain's conversation. The Nigel Farage Show. Tweet at LBC using the hashtag Farage on LBC.
Well, what a week it was in Brussels with Donald Tusk, the President of the European Council, saying that there's a special place in hell for Brexiteers who didn't have a plan. And I think we know one or two of the people who he was thinking of. Well, I wanted to find out this morning what was behind those comments and how they played out in Brussels. So I spoke to James Crisp, Brussels correspondent for the Daily Telegraph, and I started off by asking him what on earth had led Tusk into saying this?
Well, look, I mean, you know, it was extraordinary. It was extraordinary because what we had, I was in the press conference, we had an EU politician standing up and for once actually saying something with a bit of feeling and actually saying something interesting. I mean, look, Donald... you know, I have sat through thousands of hours of these press conferences, and you know as well as I do, Nigel, Brussels' strategy is to draw all the emotion out of things, to basically bore you into submission. Now, look, Donald Tusk, he wasn't boring. Okay, yes, I would say it was a bit self-indulgent. It wasn't necessarily wise. It's probably cost Theresa May some votes for her deal, if and when we ever get to that point. But, you know, I do think that he was sincere.
Do you think behind all of this...
he was sincerely angry.
Do you think... Yeah, no, clearly angry. I mean, they thought, of course, the withdrawal agreement would pass through Parliament. It hasn't, and I get their frustration. Yep. I've had a sense the last couple of days, and I wonder whether you've seen this, you know, particularly inside the Commission, that they are actually quite frightened of a no-deal Brexit.
Well, I mean, I think they definitely don't want a no-deal Brexit. They definitely don't want that to happen. You know, they see, they say this consistently, they see Brexit as a damage limitation exercise. Now, look, in terms of the Martin Selmayrs and the Michel Barniers of this world, if there is a no-deal Brexit, you know, it's the European Commission which will have to carry the can with the EU 27. You know, they're doing a negotiation, and any way you boil it down, if the negotiations end in failure which will be economically damaging to Belgium, France, the Netherlands, you know, influential countries, then, you know, the European Commission has to carry the can. But one thing they have going in their favour is, this European Commission leaves office at the end of the year. So they can just leave a big old mess for whoever takes over.
And hand it on to someone else. Now, of course, the key to all of this, of course, is the Irish backstop. And I think it's becoming clear in Westminster that if that backstop was removed, I think Mrs May would get a majority. I mean, you asked a question just a couple of weeks back. You know, Barnier had kind of said, if there's a no-deal Brexit, we'll use technology, we'll use checkpoints away from the border. Is there any sign at all that in the next few weeks, as February ticks down, that maybe there's going to be some give on the backstop?
No, and I think the key point about that is Ireland, right? They've nailed their colours to the mast of the backstop. They dreamt this up in the European Commission. It was their idea initially. Theresa May accepted it and built on it to hold some responsibility for it this as well. But the fact is that for the EU now, they made such a big deal out of this, to climb down and to fundamentally to throw Ireland under the bus would really call into question, why be a member at all? That's the thing which has always been behind the Brexit negotiations. That's the fundamental question Brexit poses to every country in the EU. Why are we members of the European Union? And if the European Union says to Ireland, look, I know you want this backstop, but we've decided to go with a country that's leaving, basically throw you under a bus, then really it raises a whole lot of questions. Like, why are we part of a club which won't even look after its members?
Yeah, no, very interesting. And finally, James, if you're right, and you probably are, that they'll stick hard on the backstop, we could finish up with a situation where Parliament in the UK doesn't want a WTO deal, can't pass and find a majority for a withdrawal agreement. We're then into extension, because that's the only other possible alternative. An extension of Article 50, does that mean the UK contesting European elections on May the 23rd?
Yeah, it absolutely does. I mean, it doesn't, they you know as well as I do, but they can always find a legal way around things. But, objectively, if the extension goes too far past July the 1st, July the 2nd, Britain would have to elect MEPs. That is not something, to be honest, that the EU wants to happen.
I bet.
But, you're probably not overly keen on. I think you thought you had your escape route sorted out.
Well, I did. And Verhofstadt did say to me, he said, I don't want Britain to leave, but I don't want Farage back. Well, if they extend Article 50, that's what may well happen. James...
Well, he says that, but I think he'll miss you when you're gone.
James Crisp, Daily Telegraph, Brussels correspondent, thank you very much indeed. Well, James there, very much an insider, spends his days inside those European Commission briefing rooms. Did make one good point, didn't he? At least what Tusk said was interesting. Normally it's as dull as ditch water over there. But his view is they can't afford to give on the backstop, all of which makes it very, very difficult for me. It means we may well get an extension of Article 50, and that's where the Brexit Party would kick in. And I'll talk about that in a few minutes. But let's just get back to this debate. Tony Blair this morning on Sky News, and this is what he said.
And the truth is, there are two. You can have a soft Brexit, which is really what Jeremy Corbyn's suggesting, or you can have the hard Brexit that Boris Johnson and Nigel Farage and other people want.
Well, he wasn't mentioning Remain, was he? He was saying another referendum to choose the type of Brexit. The soft Brexit, as they put it, by which they mean Brexit in name only, or the hard Brexit, as they call it. Sounding like a nasty word, which is what I think people actually voted for. Lynn is ticking me off. Will you please stop talking about a hard and a soft Brexit? Most people are not clear about those political terms. No, and that's quite deliberate, Lynn. During the referendum, no one talked about hard and soft Brexit. This is the language of the establishment to try and stop us having a clean break. Scott on Facebook says the EU has 39 billion reasons to not want a WTO Brexit. Vincent says, have the people asked for Blair's opinion? No. Please butt out, Mr. Blair. He does upset people, but gosh, isn't it funny? We've seen so much of Blair, and indeed John Major, over the last few weeks. Darren thinks the more we see of Blair, Major, Heseltine and Campbell, the better it is for leave. Tony is a new caller from West Hill in Devon. Good morning, Tony.
Good morning to you, Nigel. Good to speak to you.
Good to speak to you. So how do you... Blair, not mentioning Remain at all, does this represent are the People's Vote campaign now over, Tony?
Well, Nigel, I want to suggest to you that we start talking around the Tony Blairs of this world.
Right.
Tony Blair is not introducing anything new into the argument today. He didn't before. And he is history. I want to put to you a suggestion, and thank you for this opportunity to put this in the public domain, that the public needs to talk to each other. Forget the politicians. They're at loggerheads. There's no meeting of minds. But within the community, we are getting so frustrated with no action one way or the other. We need to discuss this amongst ourselves. I do not believe in another referendum. I voted against the European Union, or EEC, in the 70s. I voted to leave recently in 2016. There's no point in a third one. But we do need the public to have a voice. My suggestion is that we have a series of debates, local debates, through the county offices, through the council offices, who can facilitate such a debate, and get the opinion back from the community.
Isn't the problem, Tony, with that? And I understand what you're saying. Take this out to the country and give people the opportunity at local level to engage with the arguments. Isn't the problem, Tony, that if you were to have a town hall meeting in Yeovil, for argument's sake, the people that would turn up and be active are those who are the real hardcore activists of both sides of the divide, and not the general public?
That is correct, and I think we should screen that audience. I think we should also try to get the generations together. The younger generation. I've got an 18-year-old granddaughter at university in Birmingham. When I speak to her, she's so with it in public matters. And to get her talking to her grandfather, or the grandfather generation, to get those two talking together and mixing in the Leave and Remain, we would get this opinion within the community. And it's the community and the media that is stirring it up continually.
Do you think, Tony...
We now have another 2 years after this withdrawal agreement activates. We have another 2 years to talk among ourselves. Why don't we use that? And why don't we use the councillors that are paid anyway, and they could facilitate this in some way.
All right. No, Tony, thank you. Well, Tony's suggesting that actually the more the politicians bicker with each other and the more the media put out scare stories, the more divided we become as a society. I have to say, I sense the division is different in a way. I think the number of people who are full on for Remain and a second referendum has diminished. There's a growing acceptance, I think, that this is going to happen. And even Tony Blair accepts that. He now just says, how are we going to do it? Is it a Corbyn Brexit, where we stay part of a customs union, or is it a WTO 24 Brexit? They're the choices that Tony Blair's talking about. You're listening to the Sunday edition of the Nigel Farage Show here on LBC, and it's 10:45.
It's my huge honour to present such an important award tonight.
LBC and its sister stations from Global come together to bring you...
Thank you very much. You make us all proud.
The Global Awards 2019.
With very.co.uk.
But who will win this time? See huge performances on the night from Little Mix and Lang Lang. Voting is open and tickets are on sale now. Download the Global Player app to get yours, or go online to lbc.co.uk. Thursday, March the 7th, London's Hammersmith event in Apollo, and you could be there. The Global Awards 2019.
With very.co.uk. Get more out of every day.
LBC.
It's freezing in here.
Oh no, the heating's not working.
One nasty surprise is enough. We're with you. So with British Gas Home Care Boiler Cover, all parts and labour are included when we repair your boiler. From £12 a month, that's just 40p a day. And when you buy selected home care products online by the 18th of February, get 1 month free. Search British Gas Home Care. Conditions apply.
The perfect home close to central London. Discover Forbury in Blackheath, Barclays' brand new development of 1, 2 and 3 bedroom apartments and 4 bedroom houses. Just 13 minutes to London Bridge by train. Prices start from £530,000 for an apartment. Visit our brand new 4 bedroom show home, now open. Arrange a viewing at forbury-blackheath.co.uk.
The best place for sleepyheads is in their bridge bed in bed.
We love our sleep, and even though we use them less, we do still love real shops where we can get real customer service. Get the best of both. Buy your next new bed at Bridge Bedding, an incredible choice of beds and mattresses from the best-known brands in the UK, ensuring a great night's sleep. Bridge Bedding, Leigh-on-Sea, Hornchurch, or online at bridgebedding.com.
The best place for sleepyheads is in their bridge bed in bed.
Your company's doing pretty well. Your tax position's okay. So what's keeping you awake at night?
To face the future with confidence, talk to Vision Consulting. We've expanded from Gants Hill to the Gherkin, with clients from the fishmonger to the multi-million-pound property investment company. And our growth as a firm of chartered accountants and registered auditors is based on our passion for our clients' business.
Have confidence in your accountant. See visionconsulting.co.uk.
Did you know that there are 122 languages in India?
Or that in Singapore, you can visit the world's first night zoo. And that you'll find more bicycles in Beijing than in Amsterdam. But here's the most amazing thing to know. With Lufthansa's attractive fares, you can fly to Asia from £399, subject to availability. Book by February 10th for travel starting from February 11th. Contact your travel agent or visit lufthansa.com. Conditions apply.
Say yes to the world. Lufthansa.
Leading Britain's conversation. LBC, The Nigel Farage Show.
So if the European Union will not give anything on the Irish backstop, we could finish in a situation where Mrs May can't get a deal through Parliament. Parliament itself blocks a WTO Brexit, or maybe half of Mrs May's cabinet effectively blocks a WTO Brexit, and why people are not spending more time examining Article 24 of the GATT Treaty to give us 2 years of tariff-free and quota-free trade, I do not know. But if we get an extension, that is where the Brexit Party will kick in. The Brexit Party became a registered political party on Friday of this week. It's got my full support. It intends to fight the European elections if there is a delay to Article 50, if the can gets kicked down the road. And in the first 24 hours, 15,000 people subscribed to the Brexit Party. So there is a huge appetite out there. And if Labour and the Conservatives think they can just kick this can down the road, not deliver Brexit on the 29th of March without consequences, they've got another think coming. Matt on Twitter says to me, but the UK can't hold EU elections as the EU has handed out all of our seats to the other nations. Well, this is interesting. They have handed out seats, and they were sort of trying to keep one or two back for potential new member states as well. The fact is, Matt, the treaties are clear. The European treaties are clear. If you're a member of the European Union, you can test the European elections. And I can't see, if we extend beyond the 2nd of July, when the new European Parliament takes its seats, I can't see how any legal challenge to that wouldn't succeed. And the fact they've already doled the seats out, well, they would probably either they'd have to massively increase the number of MEPs from the current 751, which they could do, or they could say to all the other people, well, you'll be MEPs but without full voting rights. But honestly, the European treaties will trump any idea that they have given out those seats. They've reallocated those seats already. Scott is a new caller from Manchester. Scott, good morning to you.
Morning, Nigel. You okay?
I'm okay, and I'm fascinated watching this debate move. And I think Tony Blair has really taken the people's vote off the table for now.
Yeah, to be honest, I'm not really I'm not. As a person, I've been in the army. Like, I'm 29 now, but I was in the army when I was 19, like 10 years ago. I went to Afghanistan. So I feel like whatever Tony Blair says, I take it with a pinch of salt now, because anyone conscious in this country can listen to somebody that's created such effects around the world, and he still gets paid by the British taxpayers. It's a joke.
I think a lot of people feel that way, Scott, but hey, he is a former Prime Minister, and when he speaks, people do listen.
Yeah, for sure. I don't agree, but at the end of the day, you've got to. People take information and then they forget about it tomorrow, and then it's new information. It's like, oh, did Tony do that? But yesterday they was in shock at what Tony did, which is, I feel like we're a nation. We've got amnesia effects all the time, so we forget all this information, and suddenly
a week is a long time in politics, Scott, as a former Labour Prime Minister once said. But what do you? I mean, yes. Do you agree with me, Scott, that he does appear to have just taken Remain off the table completely, and that means that effectively for now that so-called People's Vote campaign is finished? He's pushing now for a soft. Yeah. He's pushing now for a soft Brexit, isn't he?
If I was constituents in these places where my MP was pushing for a people's vote and not listening to the people, like when they talk about the 52 to 48% of whatever it is, 51.8%, it's 1.3 million people more. That's like 13 Wembley stadiums full capacity, more than the other side. And they've just got to get on board and accept the result. In terms of going forward with Europe, there are trading partners. So you've got to do it on a conscious level to get to the point where it's like, right, we need a plan, but ultimately we need to get our own house in order, where we need to get, because 650 MPs are not doing the job for this country, and we can see that at the moment. So we need to create a new plan where it's becoming, in terms of terms of local councils where I, as a constituent, can vote digitally about certain things in my area, and then I'm getting involved. And then as a whole, say we have big things like this, then we can all go and get onto our laptops and our iPads.
There is a danger, Scott, that it's going the other way. There is a danger, in fact, that disenchantment with politics means fewer people will vote. Scott, can I just ask you, if we finished up with the Jeremy Corbyn proposal being the Brexit that we get, namely we leave the treaties, but we're part of the single market rules and the customs union, would you be satisfied with that?
I'd be uninspired. If most people, I always ask him, if you ask more people what they want, would you want to stay in Europe as we are, or would you like to stay in with a new customs deal? Then most people would stay in Europe as we are, because we get much more benefits as we are now than going out with a customs deal and thinking in terms of actually we can make our own laws. But in the actual sense of anything that I've ever established in my life, that wouldn't be true in terms about, we'll go out of Europe, but we're in times of customs deal. When it goes to the laws of all those customs deals,
we leave the European Union. We leave the EU,
European law,
and we still accept all their rules and have zero say. Not that our say is that big now, anyway. Scott, thank you very much indeed. Alan says to me, wishful thinking, Nigel. Tony Blair is clearly not ruling out a second referendum nor a Remain choice. He's saying it will become inevitable once the two choices facing Parliament have been ruled out. No, he isn't, Alan. Let's listen to him again.
I've never thought that you would get to another referendum going directly to it. You'll get to it when people see what the true Brexit alternatives are. And the truth is, there are two. You can have a soft Brexit, which is really what Jeremy Corbyn's suggesting, or you can have the hard Brexit that Boris Johnson and Nigel Farage and other people want. And what I've really been saying all the way through this process is you've got to decide which of those Brexits you want before you leave. Otherwise, you're going to leave without clarity. And if you leave without clarity, no clarity, no closure, the argument just goes on. And by then you'll have left, you'll have paid your money up front, you'll have given up your negotiating leverage. And for the country to do that, as Theresa May wants to do, to leave without knowing what Brexit you get, this would be, in my view, an incredibly foolish thing for the country to do. It's got to know where we're heading before we leave.
Well, it seems pretty clear to me he has accepted that we are leaving. It's just a question of how and when. Now, of course, he could change his mind again at some point in the future, and if they get an extension to Article 50, they might tentatively try to bring the people's vote back. But I think the truth of it is there's no public demand for it. It's not happening. It is a big shift. Dan in Leicester, I believe it's a big shift. Do you?
Hey, good morning. No, not really. I mean, I'll represent the constituency that would like a referendum on the terms agreed for a Brexit versus a Remain. And I think the start of Tony Blair's sentence, which was about a minute and a half before he finished the sentence, it makes that very clear. The idea of deciding what kind of Brexiteers want is a pretext to then putting that up against the Remain option on a ballot.
Why didn't he say so then, James?
It's Dan. Thanks.
Sorry, Dan, I apologise.
No, it's quite welcome. If you're going to call me another name, it might as well be James. He did. It's just at the start of the sentence. By the end of the sentence, he's basically talking about you guys writing down on paper which version of Brexit you are all going to plumb for, and then asking the people whether they want it or not. Now, I of course understand that you and people in your constituency want to leave the EU with as little written down as possible. You want to get to the 29th of March with virtually nothing on paper because it leaves you more options afterwards. But
Dan, he's virtually calling for another referendum, but this one on the terms upon which we leave. That really does take Remain off the table, doesn't it?
No, the start of his sentence says that you decide what kind of Brexit wins out of all the options available, and then you put it up against the Remain option.
So you'd then have a third referendum.
Well, no, you're talking about we make a decision now during the parliamentary process to decide what kind of Brexit, whether it's a soft Brexit or a hard Brexit, no deal, whatever different type of terminology you want to do it. And then before we actually leave the EU, you put that to the people with that decided Brexit option against the Remain option. Well, and then you decide you find out the one thing we don't know, which is March 29, 2019, what is the will of the British people?
Well, we know what it was back in 2016. And what we do know is there is no great appetite in the polls for a second referendum. Dan, none of us really know the answer, thank you. I'm sure in some ways Dan's right that Tony Blair, I'm sure, always will leave himself enough wriggle room in the future to switch arguments. But for now, I see through him and many other commentators, I do see an acceptance that Remain being on the ballot for a second referendum is pretty much off the agenda for now. But hey, who knows what is going to happen in the future. Now, looking ahead to the next hour, President Trump made a really interesting speech the other day. He's got a new Buy American, Hire American initiative on all new government purchases. He says we want American roads, bridges, railways and everything else to be built American. Is it something you've ever considered? Would you start saying it's time for us to start buying British for government contracts and perhaps our own personal choices? If you think it's unrealistic, call 0345 6060 973. Maybe you think it's the right thing to do. Brexit and British, 84850. Or maybe you think it's narrow-minded and protectionist, in which case tweet using the hashtag Farage and LBC at LBC. Watch us on Facebook. I'm live from London next.
On your radio, on your phone, and here.
Play LBC.
Leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 11 o'clock, former Prime Minister Tony Blair says his Labour Party hasn't been robust enough on stamping out anti-Semitism. He's backed calls for MP Luciana Berger's constituency party to be suspended after she faced a no-confidence motion, which has been dropped. She is Jewish and she's been critical of Jeremy Corbyn's handling of anti-Semitism within the party.
The fact that someone like Luciana Berger, who's a smart, capable, active Member of Parliament doing her best for her constituents, the fact that she should even be subject to a no-confidence motion with this type of allegations swirling around is shameful.
Labour's General Secretary Jenny Formby has rejected the calls for action in her Liverpool Wavertree seat. MP Jonathan Ashworth, who is in Mr Corbyn's top team, insists tackling anti-Semitism is a priority and progress is being made, but he still wants more to be done.
I think we do need to go faster and further on this and kick it out. I don't want to be in a party with any anti-Semite.
While Mr Blair's also made comments on Brexit today, he said no deal could be potentially devastating for the peace process in Northern Ireland. But the director of the CBI, the business lobbying organisation, has just said that the chances of no deal feel like they've increased. LBC's heard calls for driving laws to change as prosecutors confirm they are looking at whether to charge Prince Philip over his crash in Norfolk last month. 2 women were hurt on the Sandringham estate. Now, police say the case has been passed on to the CPS. Yesterday, Buckingham Palace confirmed the Duke has decided to give up his driving licence. Richard Langton's a lawyer for Slater and Gordon, who's worked on cases involving dangerous older drivers.
At present, there's no proper driving test of your vision. Even when you start, it's just the number plate at 20 metres. And when people get to the age of 70, they have to apply for their driving licence and self-certify. So it's not a question of getting a doctor to certify or an optician to certify that you're fit to drive as you get older. You just tell them you are and that's taken as read.
There's going to be a crackdown on bosses who gamble with workers' pensions. The government's announced sentences could carry up to 7 years in jail and unlimited fines. It's after the BHS scandal when the chain collapsed with a £571 million hole in its pensions pot. It's been another violent night in London. A man's been stabbed to death in East Dulwich in the southeast, while 4 teenagers have now been arrested after a 16-year-old boy was stabbed in Hayes in the west yesterday. Police have spoken to 2 Southampton fans after a video appeared to show supporters mocking the death of the Cardiff footballer Emiliano Sala. Southampton say they are going to ban anyone found to have been involved in what looked like aeroplane gestures. And The Favourite leads the nominations at tonight's BAFTA Film Awards in London. The dark comedy drama, which stars Britain's Olivia Colman as Queen Anne, has 12 nods, including Best Film. LBC weather, heavy rain for the south with snow in parts of Wales. Sunshine later on for Scotland and northern areas, with a high of 7 degrees Celsius. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Rachel Garish.
What will happen when the UK leaves the EU? Do I need to renew my passport earlier than planned?
I'm an EU citizen living in the UK. How will this affect me?
Will mobile roaming change?
How will exporting my goods be affected?
You might also have questions about how leaving the EU on the 29th of March will affect you. Find guidance and up-to-date information at gov.uk/EU exit.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation. The Nigel Farage Show.
If you think back to 2016, in the wake of Brexit, our news agenda was completely dominated by the US presidential election. A battle that at times became pretty vicious, actually, between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. And the big Trump battle cries were, America first, and we're going to make America great again. Well, in line with that, just the other day, Trump signed an executive order. Let's listen to what he had to say.
Today, I'm taking action to build on this tremendous success by strengthening the Buy American principle for federal infrastructure and federal spending. We want American roads, bridges, and railways and everything else to be built with American iron, American steel, American concrete, and American hands. And if you look at what's happened with the steel industry, it's actually amazing. The steel industry is thriving now, and it was dead when I came to office. It was dead. It was a dead industry. They were dumping steel all over the place. The jobs were going, and if any of you are in the steel industry, I think you can probably tell, you know, and aluminum too.
That's aluminium to you and I. Here's Trump again. Here's Trump summing up his policy.
We want American roads, bridges, and railways and everything else to be built with American iron, American steel, American concrete, and American hands.
Couldn't be clearer, could he? So all big infrastructure projects that the government undertakes, they are going to use US-made goods and US workers. And it kind of leads on to a bigger kind of thinking, because just the other day, the Wetherspoons chairman, Tim Martin, was speaking in Torquay and said something I think was very interesting.
One of the things that's being said is we're going to have chaos at the borders and 50% of our trades with the EU. I think Wetherspoons tried to call the bluff of the government and other people on this issue. We said, OK, what we'll do then is we won't buy anything from Europe. There's an opportunity now for British suppliers and also for non-EU suppliers, American brandy suppliers or whatever. But I think the main point about this is now for the public. People are saying, what can I do? What can I do? Well, you can do that, and I think it's possibly likely to happen. But I think what you can do now is, without bankrupting your local BMW car dealer, use your intelligence, use your intelligence, and make pro UK or non-EU choices.
So that was Tim Martin. Very, very interesting. I mean, what he's saying, yeah, buy British, but equally he's been buying some brandy from America. He's kind of saying we've got to think outside the European box. But underneath it all, I do detect with what Tim Martin's saying some similarity with what President Trump is saying, that actually consumers have a huge amount of choice. And I just wonder, given this whole debate about Brexit, is it time for us to start buying British? Is it time for us to start buying more British-made foodstuffs, drinks and manufactured products? And if you think this is unrealistic, well, call me on 0345 6060 973. Maybe you think it's becoming now our patriotic duty, in which case text to 84850. Or is this just a little bit protectionist in its thinking, and if we took it too far, would it mean higher prices and a reduction of our number of choices in what is now a global economy? If that's how you feel, please tweet using the hashtag Farage and LBC at LBC, and of course take your comments on Facebook. It's interesting, my local town, Westerham in Kent, over the course of the last few years, the brewery's reopened. It had closed in 1965. The Westerham Brewery is now up and running, very active. The local estate, it's a farm, managed farm, but they've now got vineyards there. And they're producing, in a good summer, which we had last year, they're producing up to 20,000 bottles of local sparkling wine every year. And it's really terribly good too. I also noticed in one of the local shops, local-made honey was suddenly available. And I talked to one of the local traders in Westerham who said, oh, it's all part of the Brexit boom. We're all going to start buying British again. Well, actually, in many ways, I think the idea that you buy food and drink and produce that's been made locally is, from every perspective, a very good idea. So there are some sustainability arguments about buying local or buying national. Whether that's big enough to make a real dent in the vast food and drink sales of the supermarkets is perhaps a separate question. But I do have some sympathy with this idea that we should, perhaps consciously, as consumers, support businesses in this country. It does sort of make sense to me. What do you think, folks? What does Jonty in St John's Wood think? Good morning, Jonty.
Hi, Nigel. How are you?
I am well, thank you. So, should we as consumers buy a few more British-made goods?
No. Listen, I voted Remain, okay, but I'm now a fervent Brexiteer.
Fervent? How do you go? How do you go from Remain to fervent Brexiteer?
Okay, there's context, because it's relevant to answering the question. I'll tell you how.
Yeah.
Right? And I'll tell you why. I was voted. My father was a major player in the EU. I grew up with all these Eurocrats, right?
Okay.
I didn't have a lot of... Most of them are economically illiterate, by the way. Extremely arrogant and very out of touch.
I know that bit, yeah.
Yeah. My father was an altruist, and as a Jewish family, we saw the EU as a way of forging peace and not having a repeat of the Holocaust, etc. So there were some good reasons for being fervent pro-EU. The reason I voted Remain is I just didn't see either the benefits either way being significant enough for the chaos that would ensue, which has ensued, because I just don't see the EU as important enough as an issue to be spending years debating and putting everything else on ice for. That's why I voted Remain. Okay. So I was like an agnostic Remainer. But as time has gone on and as Project Fear has unraveled the real truth, I've just seen how much rubbish there is, how many times they lie to us that things are factually one way when the other. Like, for example, pharmaceuticals are all going to run out of drugs. All that kind of stuff goes on and on. Yeah. But the thing is, I love the vision of a global Britain. And I love the vision of us being like, on March the 30th, the day after we exit Brexit, let's announce that we're free trade to all, no tariffs on anything, to anyone in the world, EU or non-EU. That, to me, has vision to it. Now, the corollary of that, the parallel to that, is not to go and sentimentally buy British because it's British. What we want is champion companies winning in their home territory because they're the best, and going abroad and winning in the foreign territories because they're the best. If we start subsidizing British companies merely because they're British, then we're going to go down the economic curve down to destitution. However, if we go and we say, actually, we're proud to be British, it's a brilliant nation, we attract talent from around the world, EU and non-EU, and we make brilliant companies, and we're first in category in this class, I think the initiatives should be to give tax breaks and to give incentives to companies to form, to come here, to create the best of British in Britain and around the world, rather than concentrating on this, what I think is a pseudo-patriotic...
John, to your plan, and unilateral free trade, I guess, is the term that we should use for it. Your plan would make people's shopping baskets a lot cheaper. Because 100%. Food would be cheaper, drinks would be cheaper that we import, underwear, shoes, you name it. Things would be a lot cheaper. But
my mum's flowers on Mum's Day will be cheaper.
They'd be 10% cheaper. Absolutely, yeah. That's quite right. Now, but isn't the risk, Jonty? Isn't the risk that, and we've seen this already, because I mean it's bizarre, because the establishment make arguments that all free trade with Europe is brilliant, but free trade with the rest of the world will cost British jobs. How would you reassure people in this country working in manufacturing that going down the unilateral free trade route would not cost a lot of jobs in Britain?
Listen, I've never understood this attachment to manufacturing. What matters is that we're either making goods or seeding crops or providing services that add value. I mean, the Soviet Union had a lot of manufacturing. They produced a lot of boots that were no good for anyone. Manufacturing is no good unless the thing that's being manufactured is providing value. What matters is being competitive. What matters is being brilliant. What matters is that people naturally want to buy from you from the UK and from around the world.
Economically, Jonty, the logic of your... economically, I get that. But let me just ask you. You go into your local store because you want to buy some honey, and you see a jar of honey there that's been produced, maybe 5 or 6 miles north of where you live, in St John's Wood, or you see a jar of honey that's come in from another part of the world, and the local honey's 75p more expensive. You'd go for the cheaper honey that's come in from the rest of the world, would you?
It depends. There may be an ecological factor in there. I might go, no, I don't want to do that. There's ecology in there. I don't want to fly stuff over.
That's the point I'm making.
There may be some different qualities to the honey. But if everything else was equal, let's just pretend I wasn't interested in ecology and it was just price, and it was between local and foreign, it was 75p cheaper to buy foreign. Then, as long as I was looking at the prices, I'm not very good at doing things like that, but if I was looking at the prices in the supermarket, I would buy foreign.
Okay, Jonty, thank you. Fascinating phone call, and Jonty there coming out with pure economic logic. But I think, folks, it depends what budget you've got, of course. But I do quite like the idea of locally produced food. Does that mean I'm a bit out of date? I don't know. Anita is a new caller from Wrexham. Good morning, Anita.
Good morning, Nigel.
So, should we buy British?
Yes.
Okay. And even if it's more expensive, Anita?
Even if it's more expensive, Nigel, because if we come out on WTO terms, then the cost of British food would come down, even to the extent of actually producing it, putting it on the supermarket shelves, and also exporting it across the world. Remember, years ago, we used to import fresh New Zealand lamb.
Yep.
And we used to buy it fresh from New Zealand. It used to go on the shelves on...
Oh, that can be done, Anita. Yeah, that can be... But, Anita, let me make this point to you. We've never been fully self-sufficient in food, which is why the U-boats in 2 world wars did their best to starve us out.
Yes. And this is the problem, because we depended on other economies throughout the world to supply us with the food chain when we could be substantially enough with all the farmers that's going on of providing food for ourselves.
Right, so produce more food and buy more British, Anita, yeah?
Yeah.
Right, fine, thank you. That's Anita's point of view. And I get a text here that I do rather agree with. Buy British, support smaller family businesses. And that's another choice, isn't it? You get the choice to support local producers, local makers, and it's a choice. And I don't think it's being sentimental. I actually think it's about community, and it's about encouraging people to go out there and be entrepreneurs. You're listening to the Sunday edition of the Nigel Farage Show here on LBC. It's 11:15.
This is LBC.
Little Red Riding Hood has been trying to sell her grandma's home for some time now, but the estate agent's shining sharp teeth have left her with sweat on her brow.
Trust me, darling, I just want what's best for you, hence the added fees.
However, she spoke to the friendly team at Property Rescue, who cut out the middleman and guaranteed a sale in as little as 48 hours with no fees whatsoever. Fast forward to living happily ever after. Visit propertyrescue.co.uk. Property Rescue. Fast forward to sold.
Someone's knocking at the door. Somebody's ringing the bell.
Did you know that winning postcodes are announced every single day with People's Postcode Lottery, and only playing postcodes are entered, so the prizes are always won? It costs just £10 a month to play in all draws. Join in with your postcode to play at postcodelottery.co.uk. PPL manage lotteries on behalf of good causes. Players must be over 16. Terms and conditions apply. Please play responsibly for Gamble Aware.
Someone's knocking at the door.
Most radio adverts begin in a pristine recording studio. But not this one. We're recording on the streets of central London, polluted by toxic air. Because there's no better place to tell you that the Central London Ultra-Low Emission Zone is coming on the 8th of April this year. It will apply 24 hours a day, every day of the year, in the same area as the congestion charge zone. Unless your car, motorbike or smaller van meets the new stricter emission standards, you will have to pay the £12.50 daily charge. Search ULEZ to check your vehicle and see if you need to pay. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
Being a gnome isn't easy. All those knocks and scrapes. Once, I was minding my own business, then wham! Football snapped my arm clean off. Alfonso's in bits. Walter disappeared. Of course, they never catch anyone. But the new High View outdoor security camera has motion detection, two-way audio and night vision. We're saved!
Protect your gnomes and your home from your phone. Search Hive to discover more. Hive, let's get living.
Shall we upload a photo of us with a flamingo?
No.
What about a photo of the stolen Ia Deserta beach?
No.
We have to share one of us next to this beautiful lagoon.
Stop it, give me that phone. There are many ways to keep the Algarve and its hidden gems your little secret. But only one way to fly. Fly British Airways from Gatwick to Faro from £39 each way based on a return fare. Availability and dates are limited. Conditions and booking fee may apply. For more details, see ba.com/Gatwick.
You see the beautiful game differently and want a different way to bet. So when your gut says there are good odds out there, your smarts say you could get better on the Betfair exchange. Because you don't bet against the bookie, you bet against someone like you. Meaning the odds could be better and you could win bigger. The Betfair exchange, where gut instinct meets smarts.
Exchange customers pay up to 5% commission. Other charges may apply. 18 plus begambleaware.org.
This is LBC, the Nigel Farage Show. Call 0345 6060 973. Text 84850. Tweet at LBC using the hashtag Farage on LBC.
Trump is going all out for American-built products, and he wants his own steel, his own plastics, his own aluminium or aluminum to him to be used, and American workers on all their infrastructure projects. Let's listen to Trump on this.
We want American roads, bridges, and railways and everything else to be built with American iron, American steel, American concrete, and American hands.
It's called America First. It's part of his Make America Great Again campaign. And it's really interesting when Wetherspoon's boss Tim Martin says, well, we're not going to buy Jägermeister anymore, which is made in Germany. We're making our own version in Lancashire. And does he have a point? Should we start thinking, as consumers, about making choices to buy British? And I have to say that I have great sympathy with this argument, particularly when it comes to local food and drink stuffs. I've argued already twice in the first quarter that sustainability, and it's a word we hear all the time. I even get this by text. I disagree with you on hard Brexit, but I completely agree with you on growing our own food. All of it. Well, all of it may be optimistic, as I say. We weren't able to do that in 1917 or indeed in 1940. So whether we can grow, but we could potentially grow and produce a lot more of it. Not to mention fish, but I'm trying not to get the common fisheries policy into this hour, but we could catch a lot more of our own fish. Anthony on Facebook says, surely some of the left-wing Remainers would be in favour of buying more British because it cuts down on pollution, transport costs, packaging, etc. Why would they want to make food travel over such distances? And Anthony, with some foodstuffs, it's extraordinary. There are some shellfish products that go from Europe to Thailand where they get processed and then come back again. So when it comes to food miles, and by the way, I've always had some sympathy with the green sustainability arguments. You probably hear that coming out in this hour. But against that, the big argument of Brexiteers is we're free to trade and buy goods across the world. So there are two competing visions here, although they're not, I think, entirely contradictory. You know, I'm talking particularly about buying products made by small local producers, and that makes a lot of sense to me, even if it's a little bit more expensive, if you can afford it. Nick is a new caller from High Wycombe. Good morning to you.
Hello, Nigel.
So, should we buy more British?
Well, I just wanted to ring up because I've been selling software for 30 years.
Yeah.
And when you try to sell software, British or American software, to Germany, they don't want to buy it, and neither do the French. They will always buy SAP, or there'll always be a reason, you know, like the plan comptable, or there's some sort of funny tax rule that you have to have a donkey going up a mountain to be able to do payroll. And really, what I'm saying is that basically in the high-tech and software industry, Europe really isn't, and certainly Germany and France are not a great market. We do find that the Scandinavians are much more receptive, but I run a very small software company now, and the biggest market is America. When I used to sell stuff over there for other companies, you know, companies like J.R. Simplot, which you probably never heard of.
I haven't, to be honest with you.
They turn over $6 billion, and they make chips for McDonald's. And Americans make decisions. They don't muck about. So that's where I think the market is.
Yeah, well, certainly Trump has struck a rich seam among many of his own voters, and we have seen a reinvigoration of the steel industry, the coal industry, etc. Do you think the Brits would respond in the same way, Nick?
I think they should do, certainly because of Brexit. There's our high streets, for example. You know, we need to support those. We need to be more thoughtful about small local businesses.
I agree.
And I think think they will do. Certainly, this has sort of put attention to it. Yeah.
Yeah, no, Nick, thank you for your call. I agree with you, and I do think Brexit in some ways is the opportunity for us to rethink one or two of these things. Now, I use local honey as an example. Anita on Facebook says, local honey gives hay fever sufferers more immunity. Buy local. Anita, I have no idea whether that's right or not. John from Stockport says, I'm already limiting what I buy from the EU. Apart from the Greeks, they've suffered enough, and the Italians. Graham in Whitstable says, yes, we currently have choice. We won't after the end of March. It's being taken away. Oh, Graham, please, get a life. We're leaving a tiddly little bit of the world called Europe. It's tiddly. Yeah? It's 7% of the world's population. It's 15 to 16% of global GDP. We're potentially, Graham, opening ourselves up to a great, big, exciting world. And when you hear these ridiculous stories about, queues up the M20, well, actually, we quite often have queues up the M20 when the French fishermen are striking anyway. But when you hear all this rubbish, the Mayor of Calais has already said there will be no delays to products coming into the United Kingdom, whatever kind of Brexit we get. You see, I knew that Brexit would come into this debate. It just had to, I guess. Joseph is calling from Preston. Good morning, Joseph.
Hello again, Nigel.
Hello there. So, do you buy British, Joseph? Do you go out there and look at a product and think, do you know what? I'm going to buy this, even if it is a bit more expensive?
Well, I am a student, a bit strapped for cash, so I will generally go for the cheapest option.
Yeah, okay.
So buying British for the sake of buying British isn't really in my list of priorities.
Okay.
But my main argument, it might not be relevant to the average consumer, but I think it's still, quite indicative. The F-35, we've obviously bought that from the United States, but our companies Rolls-Royce and BAE have a 15% share in its development and construction.
Yeah.
So, I think global partnerships, doing what makes economic sense, but also promoting British industries with valuable areas of expertise to participate in a global economy is, I think, the way to go forward. There shouldn't be protectionism, but there should definitely be promotion of British manufacturing and services.
Yeah. I wasn't arguing, Joseph, for protectionism, but I was arguing. I mean, it does seem to me, Joseph, that Trump's right about one thing. If we've got a big government, contract, we're spending taxpayers' money, shouldn't we try to put British manufacturers first? The trouble is, and we're back to it again, but under the European Union procurement directives, we're not allowed to make those choices. So wouldn't that make sense, though, Joseph? Big infrastructure projects, let's try and use British workers, let's try and use British-made goods if we possibly can.
I mean, potentially, yes. Supporting British industries, major British companies for big infrastructure projects like the Northern Powerhouse plan that's just come through and is being submitted to Parliament. Promoting British companies for that could help create jobs and stimulate the global economy, but you still have to think about cost effectiveness. And if an American or European or Japanese firm is going to do a better job for a lower price, then again, I think you just have to be pragmatic about it.
Okay.
Don't promote British companies for the sake of doing so.
But as you say, with the F-35, it's a very expensive aeroplane, fighter jet, but it's got British components in it too.
But it's actually cheaper than Typhoon, so there is that per plane.
Yeah. No, Joseph, interesting point, that actually cooperation can work and can favour both. And, of course, there is an argument, that free trade absolutely can benefit both sides of that equation. On Twitter, you talk about growing more of our own food. What is the point of purposely making our situation far worse for no reason? Brexit will bring zero benefits to 99. Well, you see, some of you, you're so obsessed, completely obsessed with overturning the referendum result that you can't actually have a rational debate about this subject. But I do accept that the EU does have a big influence on this because of tariffs, because of procurement rules and all the rest of it. I'm just saying in principle, doesn't Tim Martin have a point when he talks about making decisions as a consumer? And isn't Trump actually right that as a country, if you're doing big national projects, you should try to use your own manufactured goods and people? Shelley says, I buy British where I can. unfortunately, the amount of money you have to spend is a key element. Yep, Shelley, and I talked about that locally produced sparkling wine just down the road from me, and it is delicious, but I'll be honest with you, I can buy champagne £3 or £4 a bottle more cheaply. That is absolutely true. So there's price, there's quality, there's sentimentalities, all these things that come into consumers' decision. Scarlett says, it's a competitive food market and we will be up against it. Quality and price will be important. And Scarlett, one of the arguments here is, sure, you can buy cheap imported, clothes, shirts, for example. You buy cheap imported shirts, but if you produce a British shirt that is better made, even though it's more expensive, quality is what people will pay for, if they can afford it. Trish says, I'm buying British, but I admit I prefer Irish beef. Right, well, if we have a no-deal Brexit, Trish, Irish beef is going to be more expensive, and the Irish tea shop will have quite a lot of egg on his face as well. Martin is a new caller from Ilminster in Somerset. Hi, Martin.
How's it going?
Good morning. So, should people buy more locally produced foods and goods?
Yes, it is. It's the way forward, but it's not as easy as everyone makes it out to be.
Okay, go on.
Generally, the common housewife or whoever does a weekly shops for cheap. You've got your budget.
Yep.
And us farmers, we struggle to make cheap meat at the moment. And we're on our knees, and people saying it'd be cheaper when we leave Europe. So what's that going to affect us?
But Martin, if your product, is marketed as locally produced, sustainable, hasn't racked up huge numbers of air miles, isn't that of itself quite attractive to some shoppers?
Yes and no, but look at us, we do beef and pork, and we struggle every week.
Do you?
The outgoings are, fair enough, we've got the red tape in Europe, doesn't help, but our welfare standards up to very high standards. But to try to get that cheaper meat and make a profit, you can't. We're setting up eventually. We just can't make a living.
I've been told, Martin, by people producing pigs that the problem is we have the highest standards of pig welfare in the European Union, and that we enforce it, and that there are other countries who can undercut the price because they don't have the same welfare standards. Would that be true?
I completely agree with you on that, especially when you look at things like Downpack in Denmark. All they really want is the hams, so all the bacon and sausage are byproducts. That's how they can send it over cheaply.
Yeah.
Because they don't even make a profit on that.
No.
They made a profit out of the hams.
Martin, I'm sorry to hear your struggles. I've got to let you go time-wise, but I'm sorry to hear of your struggles. And Martin there saying it is very, very difficult for British farmers to produce something at a reasonable price. It is now 31 minutes past 11 and time for the news with Rachel Garish.
Former Labour Prime Minister Tony Blair says his party hasn't been robust enough on stamping out anti-Semitism. He's backed calls for Labour MP Luciana Berger's constituency party to be suspended after she faced a no-confidence motion, which was dropped. There's going to be a crackdown on bosses who gamble with workers' pensions. The government's announced sentences could carry up to 7 years in jail and unlimited fines. LBC's heard calls for driving laws to change, as prosecutors confirm they are looking at whether to charge Prince Philip over his crash in Norfolk last month. Yesterday, Buckingham Palace confirmed the Duke has decided to give up his driving licence. LBC weather, heavy rain for the south with snow in parts of Wales. Sunshine for Scotland and northern areas, though, with a high of 7 degrees.
LBC.
There are two types of people in this world. Those that wait and those that do. This is for the doers. You know that luck isn't found, it's made. And here at Esme, we know that good things come to those who go and get them. That's why our business loans are simple and easy to arrange, so you can seize every day. Apply today. Search Esme Loans. Eligibility criteria and fees apply.
Nice, isn't it?
Yeah. Are the alloys standard?
Optional, sir.
Heated front seats and steering wheel?
Available with a cold weather pack?
Sat-nav?
Afraid not.
At Vauxhall, buy a new Corsa Griffin with a whole host of features as standard.
What do I get?
Would you like a coffee?
The Corsa Griffin. All Griffin, no bull. Visit your nearest retailer now. Vauxhall, British brand since 1903. Available at participating retailers only. Limited units while stocks last.
Block management? It's a doddle, isn't it? I mean, once you've got budget approval, all you need to do is your service charge invoices,
health and safety regulations paperwork, do the cleaning, the gardening, general maintenance, sort out site inspections, arrange contracts, insurance, emergency representation.
Yes, block management. Such a doddle.
Save time and money and cut down on the stress. For complete block management solutions, just call ABC Estates. ABC will take care of all your day-to-day management, leaving you as happy as Larry.
For complete block management solutions, see abcestates.co.uk or call 0800 888 6688.
When I was 16, school was the last place I wanted to be. I'd lost my dad years earlier and everything became overwhelming. But my teacher, she didn't want my past to hold me back. She taught me that in good times and bad, you need the courage to go on. And for my dad, I did.
Teaching. Every lesson shapes a life. Get free one-to-one support with our teacher training advisors. With years of teaching experience, they understand the application process inside out. Subject to eligibility. Search Get Into Teaching.
46 years ago, Swale Heating was born. We've installed thousands of boilers, and now the process is even easier. There's no need for a household survey. Just go to swaleheating.com. Answer a few questions, we'll recommend the best boiler, then install it at a time to suit you. Rely on us to keep you warm.
Grubby walls? Stagnant style? Paint it with B&Q. New Good Home durable coloured 2.5 litre matte emulsion is just £16. It offers the perfect balance of great quality, colours and value. So for brilliant painting products at everyday low prices, you can do it when you B&Q it.
The Nigel Farage Show on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
Is Brexit an opportunity to change the way we think and perhaps start buying British a bit more? Or is that economic nationalism, narrow-minded, and it means things become a lot more expensive? By the way, I'm all for, when we left the European Union, us engaging more fully with the rest of the world. I do just think as consumers, there are choices we can make that can benefit businesses, and particularly, in many cases, local businesses. And I think that makes a lot of sense and is more sustainable. Buy anything from anywhere. Europe isn't the be-all and end-all, but support British, it's healthy. Well, hopefully that is the case. And we just heard from a pig farmer struggling to sell his product because we've got higher standards of welfare for our animals than much of the rest of Europe. And I suppose you wouldn't be allowed to put that on a label, but I do know from pig farmers that I visited over the years that to be the case, and they're very angry about it. I've got this. I buy British whenever I can. Today, I've been ordering prime ribs of British beef from my favourite butchers in Yorkshire. Brexit is our golden opportunity, and I'm very excited as to what the future holds for the whole of the UK, says Michael in Enfield. Lives in Enfield. He's buying his beef from Yorkshire. There you are. Mike is a new caller from Solihull. Good morning, Mike.
Hi, good morning, Nigel. I have 2 points for you.
Sure.
The first one is the EU Procurement Directive.
Ah, yeah.
I am a lawyer, and I can tell you that we do follow the EU Procurement Directive quite in the governmental buying systems they have in the UK. But are you having a laugh? Do you think they follow this in Italy? Do you think they're going to appoint? Do you think they appoint a British firm and follow it from their mates in Italy when they read the directive that they've never heard of?
Do you know, Mike? I mean, the Ministry of Defence and people like this slavishly follow EU procurement directives, meaning we more often than not make non-British choices. And you've made the point about Europe, of course. We obey all the rules and many others look at it differently. No, I agree with that totally.
They certainly do. And the second point, Nigel, is, look, I'm a British entrepreneur and I have firms ready, willing and able to produce and manufacture and service anything that's currently bought in Europe. Give us the contract in England, we'll make it here. All we need is the contract, a long-term plan. We can start manufacturing. We can start providing whatever is needed that is currently being provided by foreign or the EU.
So at the moment, we're coming towards the end of the Crossrail project, which is late, but a massive project across London. HS2, although, I don't think they've got very far with it, and I think it's too expensive, but hey, we're going to build HS2. I mean, these are massive engineering projects. Do you think a post-Brexit British government could buy all the materials and, crucially, get all the workers it needs? And would it be competitive, Mike?
I think it would in the longer term. Short term, no, because we've gone down the route of the EU as it currently stands. But give it a longer-term strategy, the manufacturing and that skill and knowledge base will come back to the UK, and we'll start to do the next HS3 can all be bought British. It's not going to happen overnight, but isn't that better to follow a longer-term strategy for the country rather than a short-term one?
Mike, the other thing, of course, and anyone that's ever listened to this show knows I bang on and on and on about this point, but I do think one of the things we absolutely have to do is to start to invest in Britain's youth, encourage fewer of our 18 and 19-year-olds to do subjects at university that aren't practical, and we need to start training engineers, doctors, nurses. Surely that's the investment in the future we need. And you would need those people too, Mike, wouldn't you?
Well, I've got 4 kids. I'm trying to get 2 of my girls into engineering. There's a massive shortage of engineering, especially for young ladies at this time in the UK.
Yeah.
Dyson, at least he had the guts to put his money where his mouth is and start a university for engineers.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think Bamford's done the same. JCB have done the same. They've got their own, school of engineering up in Staffordshire somewhere. Mike, thank you for your call. Nigel, local food and drink produce is actually already a massive industry. It's been growing. Local artisans and small businesses up and down the country. It's been growing for a decade. It's becoming more popular. All this has happened whilst we're in the EU. Open your eyes, says Les. Les, I know it has been happening. And people do. I think there is an increasing demand to buy local. All I'm arguing, Les, is that Brexit is a moment in our national consciousness where we might just think about this a little bit more. Les, it's been great to see parts of this country where you couldn't buy any local produce, and now you travel, and you see local cheeses. I understand we actually manufacture more different types of cheese now than the French do, which seems pretty incredible. Les, it's done well as an industry. I mean, I quite like a glass of gin occasionally. I don't know how many gin distilleries there now are in the country, but it must be 5 or 10 times the number it was 20 years ago. All of this is good, but we can, I think, do more of it. Kate is a new caller from Tufnell Park. Good morning.
Hello, Nigel. I wish the government was as excited as the Brexiteers are about moving on.
Wow.
We should be gleaming, shouldn't we? Anyway, getting back to food.
Yes.
I only buy British. In the supermarket, I tour around there and I really look for British. And if there are no tomatoes from the UK, then I don't buy them that day. And the thing is, like sprouts and parsnips, they're really cheap. So I don't know why people are going on that they're expensive, because they're not.
Well,
I don't buy anything that's come hundreds of miles. I just buy seasonal and British.
Yeah, I was really angry, Kate. It was June. It was sort of 3rd week of June. And I'm going back 5 or 6 years. And I went into a relatively local supermarket in Kent, and I thought, I'll get some cherries. It's June. And Kent is a cherry-producing county.
Yeah.
And these cherries all came from another part of the world. I was really angry, and I had a chat with the manager about it all. And I went back the next week, and they were all English cherries. I don't know whether it was me, but it did strike me. It did strike me that if you're living in a county that produces quite a lot of fruit at that time of the year, they should really be selling it, shouldn't they?
They should be. And, I think it's the supermarkets. They need to encourage it. And we need a big sign up saying British produce, and to just go straight to it.
Kate, it's very interesting. Whenever the supermarkets are challenged on this, they always say that they do their best to buy local, sustainable, but actually we know it's not true, and they're dealing with stuff on an absolutely massive scale. Kate, I've been encouraging small local businesses. The real change would be the supermarkets, wouldn't it? And as you say, if the big names were prepared to have British sections, then there'll be a lot more people like you. Kate, you must spend hours looking through where cherry tomatoes have been produced.
I managed to get some from the Isle of Wight the other day.
Right.
That was good.
And did the other shoppers look at you as if you're some sort of wildly eccentric person?
They probably do, but, I'm too old in the tooth now to worry about other people.
And how long have you been buying British for, Kate?
My whole life. I've always done it.
You've always done it, right.
Yeah, I'm in my 70s now, but since I've been buying, I've always bought British.
Right, very good.
I can't buy anything that's travelled miles.
No, Kate, I get the point. Thank you. And Kate, there are a lot of arguments here. about sustainability, about food miles, about, if you worry about it a huge amount, carbon dioxide content. Mike is a new caller from Hounslow. Good morning, Mike.
Hello there, how are you doing?
Doing well. Well, I mean, Mike, there is a sentimental attachment, I think, to buying local things produced by small producers, and that's a good thing. But if we take buying British too far, would that be a problem?
No, I don't think so, because I think one of the things that we've lost access to is variety. And I'll just give you one sort of little example. My parents, they had an apple orchard, and they grew all sorts of wonderful different species of apples, different sizes, odd shapes, odd colours. You know what I mean? And it got to the point where they just couldn't sell them because grocers couldn't take them, supermarkets couldn't take them, and it's because of European standardisation and regulations. And it was just heartbreaking, because some of these flavours, some of these varieties were really lovely to eat and to cook with, but they just couldn't sell them. So in the end, they were almost giving them away. I mean, last year's crop just fell on the ground. It's heartbreaking.
Yeah, no, this move to, and it is the EU. It's not just the EU, but yes, this move towards harmonisation, standardisation, pasteurisation has removed a huge amount of choice. Yeah, I mean, russet perhaps is not one of the rarer varieties, but not easy to buy russets in a shop, is it?
No. I mean, we used to sell, Lane's Prince Albert and all sorts of wonderful, varieties like this, old English varieties and sort of things. And you just can't sell them. So, but I think if there was a mechanism, I mean, I know you have these farmers markets on a Sunday sometimes, but if there was a mechanism to actually encourage, I don't know what resurrection, but bringing some of these back, and people just try them out and see what they think, and go from there, sort of thing.
So cut regulations, Mike. That's your message.
Yes, and I just want to say one other thing, if I may. Just want to say a word of thanks to you for driving a coach and horses through the rubbish that we keep hearing about the Brexit. I mean, I think it is an opportunity. I think we should embrace it, and I think we should go for it.
I did it, Mike, because I want to eat odd-shaped, sized, coloured apples, and that will be one of the great benefits if we succeed. Thank you. You're listening to a Sunday edition of the Nigel Farage Show here on LBC. It's 11:45.
LBC.
Most radio adverts begin in a pristine recording studio, but not this one. We're recording on the streets of central London, polluted by toxic air. Because there's no better place to tell you that the Central London ultra-low emission zone is coming on the 8th of April this year. It will apply 24 hours a day, every day of the year, in the same area as the congestion charge zone. Unless your car, motorbike or smaller van meets the new stricter emission standards, you will have to pay the £12.50 daily charge. Search ULEZ to check your vehicle and see if you need to pay. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
Looking for your perfect kitchen? Visit roomsense.co.uk.
Quality at a price you can afford. That's Room Sense.
At Volkswagen Commercial Vehicles, we know that when you've got your own business, there are all manner of things that keep you up at night. Do we need to cut our prices? What if my rent goes up? How can I afford the initial payment for a new van? Well, that's one thing you can cross off the worry list, because you can now pick up a new Volkswagen Transporter with no upfront payment. The Volkswagen Transporter, from £269 a month and absolutely nothing to pay up front on contract hire. Volkswagen Commercial Vehicles. Incredible offers to help your business thrive. Working with you. Business users only, excluding VAT at 20%, over 48 months, no initial rental. T's and C's apply. No ownership until the 31st of March 2019. Volkswagen Finance.
Hello, I'm John Cleese. In our previous radio campaign, they hired another actor to read out our end line and phone number. But from now on, I'm going to be taking over that responsibility myself to see if we can't inject some of the iconic Cleese humour into it. So, let's see. Billions are still owed to millions. We fight any claim, are waiting to fight your PPI claim. Text FIGHT to 80355.
Did you know that there are 122 languages in India? Or that in Singapore you can visit the world's first night zoo? And that you'll find more bicycles in Beijing than in Amsterdam? But here's the most amazing thing to know. With Lufthansa's attractive fares, you can fly to Asia from £399, subject to availability. Book by February 10th for travel starting from February 11th. Contact your travel agent or visit lufthansa.com. Conditions apply.
Say yes to the world. Lufthansa.
Leading Britain's conversation. LBC, The Nigel Farage Show.
We're talking about buying British. We're talking about sustainability. But of course, we wouldn't really perhaps be able to even talk about buying British if it hadn't been up to 3,000 young men who in 1940, in the Battle of Britain, had defended our skies and prevented a German Nazi invasion, which was coming. And this week, Wing Commander Tim Elkington, one of the few, as they were known, died. And we now only have 6 men left alive that were in those Spitfires and Hurricanes in 1940. Another one called Bob Hughes, who I interviewed and played the interview here last year on LBC. He died about a month ago. There are just 6 people left alive. Among those few are all now in their late 90s. And it is a remarkable thing, unique thing, the Battle of Britain, without which, as I say, everything would have been different. And still, our government chooses not to honour them in any way at all. And I think we are really mean, really very measly about all of this. The French have a medal called the Légion d'honneur, which they give out in circumstances like this. We appear to have nothing. And I think to decorate the last half a dozen people who took part in this would cost absolutely nothing, would bring to the attention of a younger generation the amazing efforts they made to keep this country free. I don't know what's wrong with us. Back to sustainability, buying British. We've talked about odd-shaped apples, getting rid of some regulations. What about cars? What about UK-made cars? Maybe we should be more conscious and buy more of those. Richard is a new caller from Gloucester. Good morning to you.
Oh, good morning, Nigel. Greetings. Pleasure to speak to you.
Well, thank you. So do you buy British, Richard?
The problem is, Nigel,
yeah,
that there is no support. There has not been support for 40 years for start-up manufacturing companies, neither taxation nor encouragement of risk capital, which is commonplace in California and places like that. The Germans do support their own industry, and we don't. The City of London is not interested in helping start-up businesses, not at all. They're only interested in manipulating money.
Now, we used, Richard, didn't we, in the past? We've had all sorts of, innovation zones and start-up zones. Is that the kind of, should we sort of take a bit of the West Midlands, for argument's sake, and say, right, any new manufacturing company or any new company that comes and settles in this area, will be exempted from corporation tax for 5 years or 10 years? Is that the way to do this?
Well, every little bit helps, as they say, but it's fundamental. I could give you a litany of all the household name companies that have disappeared or been merged, and when they merge, the company that takes them over closes down the factory, transfers production elsewhere. You name it. It doesn't happen. But it
could be, Richard, that some of those firms that have closed down may have been very badly run, may have been very inefficient, may have been producing a poor product at a bad price.
Yes, but there's a lot of others that just couldn't make it. I mean, look at Dyson. The struggle he had to actually get where he is now. To begin with, there was enough discouragement for him to give up and, become a gardener or something.
Right. So, encourage entrepreneurship, use the tax system, use whatever you can. Richard, thank you. And I think that a lot of people would agree with that we've not had any sense of industrial strategy or planning in this country. But even if you were encouraged to open up a factory tomorrow, where on earth would you find the skilled workers? I'll tell you where you'd find them. You'd have to import them from somewhere else in the rest of the world because we've not trained enough young people. Steph, loads of messages here. Steph says, we have been making a conscious choice to deselect EU produce in our supermarket for over a year, and we haven't suffered one jot. Nigel, wouldn't local business prices come down when we leave as they'll be able to become more competitive? David, that depends. And, a lot will depend, of course, on business rates and many, many other factors. I agree with you. Buying British applies more to the people who live in the countryside. Yes, it does. Not so much in London. London is so expensive to live. I buy when I see the British flag, says Ted in Southend. I'm not vegan or vegetarian, but the majority of people in the UK eat far too much meat, e.g. every day. Humans are supposed to have a balanced diet. Well, Tom, and that's an argument for saying that our farmer, who was on earlier, saying that his British-produced pork, raised with a very, very high standard of husbandry, and he, accepts that it's more expensive in the supermarket, and that would need quite a big change, in a sense, culturally. People have to say, right, we are going to eat less meat, we're going to drink less sparkling wine, or whatever it is, and you would go for quality and pay a slightly higher price. These are all judgments that consumers make. Frank is a new caller from Bridgnorth in Shropshire. Good morning to you.
Well, nice talking to you.
Good to talk to you. So, do you buy British, Frank?
To give you an idea, Nigel, I've been into a supermarket, I think, twice in 10 years. I buy everything local, everything off the stalls, everything off the market.
Right. Now, you're able to do that living in a market town like Bridgnorth, but if you were living in the middle of Birmingham, Frank, it would be quite hard to do that, wouldn't it?
Well, no, there's still lots of little shops in Birmingham sourcing stuff locally if you look for them.
Are there?
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, the Asian-owned businesses as well source a lot of local produce and from small producers overseas as well.
I detect, Frank, a sort of slight anti-supermarket tone in your voice.
Yeah, I can't stand the places.
Right.
They're too big. Everything's got too big, Nigel. This is the problem. People want small, local. Everything is merged into bigger and bigger. This is why the European Union is such a problem.
But it's
bigger
difficult,
companies,
Frank.
Bigger local authorities.
Yeah, no, I get that. But, Frank, imagine you've got, I don't know, whether it's the housewife or house husband increasingly these days, and they're going out to shop once a week because, both partners work, for argument's sake. They're going out on a Saturday morning to shop. They've got a couple of hours to do it. Little Johnny's playing football. They've got, they've got to pick him up at 12. Isn't that the problem, Frank, that actually the supermarket is the only really rational choice for these people?
Yeah, I suppose it is, but why is life, which is supposed to be getting better with all this technology and easier, why is it getting so much more difficult and filled with stress?
Well, actually, Frank, it's getting more stressful. We're all working harder, and for most people, life is getting tougher. In many ways, not easier, Frank. Lovely call, and Frank seems to have a very relaxed life, living out, and Bridgnorth's beautiful, on the Severn there, out in Shropshire, and yeah, Frank can make those choices. Not so easy for everybody else. Be good, perhaps, if the supermarkets, that point was made earlier, advertised a little bit more freely what was British produce and what wasn't. We've had ridiculous sort of tractors put on labels, but half that stuff could have been produced in the EU and just packaged here. So Brexit actually is an opportunity to identify some of this stuff much, much more clearly. Nigel, one thing I have noticed is that nearly all our public service vehicles are Mercedes, whereas in the past they were all British, from police cars, fire engines, ambulances, dust lorries, etc. Well, again, I think we're back to our old friend, the EU Procurement Directive, but I do agree with you. I think actually, at government contract level, it would make sense for them to buy cars or vans or whatever it may be that were assembled in the United Kingdom. I get that. You see, Trump has a point on all of this, and I think American public opinion is going to thank him for doing this. By the way, the job figures are out for January, and over 300,000 new people went into work in America in January alone. You can kind of see why. Pete is a new caller from Abingdon. Good morning, Pete.
Good morning, Nigel. Pleasure to speak to you.
Pleasure to speak to you. Now, Frank,
first-time caller, but a long-time listener. So,
well, you're very welcome. Now, our last caller was from Bridgnorth, out in rural Shropshire, and you're calling from rural Oxfordshire. So I guess if you want to buy local, you can, can't you?
Yes, but there is, there's a whole variety of factors that kind of come into this argument, which are obvious. Cost being probably the main thing. What I've noticed, and I travel around quite a bit and speak to a lot of people, is that, for one example, is the kind of launch and growth of the microbreweries.
Yes.
You go to high streets, and you've got local people who've just said, look, there's a shop that they've managed to convert into a small brewery, and it's great. You get 30 people in there, almost like a wine bar that used to be, but all the stuff is pretty much local. It's homemade beer and produce, and that's one example of how it can work.
And there's been a real boom, Pete, in this, hasn't there? There's been a massive boom in this.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's huge, and so that is evidence that it can work, and it just needs the support of the people. Now, obviously, cost is going to be a factor. I mean, I work with people. I'm a psychologist, and my interest is in people, and my knowledge is in people, and what I see there is that, at the end of the day, whatever you are trying to encourage people to do, it's about giving them the vision and galvanising them both individually and collectively, and giving them the idea and the sense of freedom that they can actually be empowered themselves. And I think, touching on your comment earlier about the Brexit Party. That you've put your name to, though that is so important. It's hugely important in everything that we're talking about here, because the political landscape has changed so much, and I think that whatever the decision that comes out of the Brexit debacle, unfortunately it's become a debacle.
It has, yes.
Whatever decision that comes out of it, I think that the winner, in my view, the winner is that the people of Great Britain, the UK, have come to the political scene in a way that's never been. Well,
absolutely, Pete. We've got more politics being discussed and debated than ever before, and maybe we're going to buy British more. Liz says cherries from Chile, ridiculous amount of air miles, and she's got a point. I'll be back tomorrow night at 6. I'll be in Strasbourg at 3 this afternoon. It's Ian Payne, but up next it's Majid Nawaz.
Thank you, Nigel. Coming up, John McDonnell has strongly defended a prominent Labour activist suspended from the party for anti-Semitism after saying Jews were chief financiers of the slave trade. Tony Blair has said that Labour has not been robust enough in challenging anti-Semitism. Is he right? Before that, the Duke of Edinburgh has given up driving on public roads after surrendering his licence to police. That's been confirmed by Buckingham Palace last night. A good move? And should there be an upper age limit to driving? But first, the government is planning a 2-day international conference in London in July to galvanise a consensus on the need to protect journalists. Do the murders of Jamal Khashoggi by Saudi Arabia and the killing of Marie Colvin of the Sunday Times by Syria make the case for this conference?